A horrifying message for America from the terrorists in Iraq. Islamic extremists releasing a new video claiming to show the beheading of an American journalist and now threatening to kill another American in their custody. The man in orange is said to be journalist James Foley. He is a New Hampshire native. Foley was reportedly kidnapped in Syria back in 2012. The video shows Foley kneeling beside a man dressed in black, and then the video shows the man in black beheading Foley. We have an exclusive with former CIA and NSA Director Mike Hayden in a moment. But first, our Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is live for us tonight in Washington. Catherine?
Megan, tonight Fox News is told there is little reason to doubt the tape's authenticity. The U.S. intelligence community is doing a forensic analysis. Do the images and the voice match Foley's? Where was it shot? And what is the credibility and terrorist ties of the individual who posted the video to YouTube? There was a sense within the U.S. intelligence community that something like this was coming because of previous threats from ISIS directed at Foley, who'd been working in Syria. And as a result, the video is being taken very seriously. According to the website where Foley worked, the video was uploaded to YouTube late today and then removed. The video claims that the reported killing of Foley is in retaliation for the recent airstrikes by the United States. In addition, Fox News is told that there is evidence significantly that ISIS has at least 2 other Americans in their custody. In a recent interview, the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, who just retired, warned that al-Qaeda's ideology is growing in an exponential way. And Mike Flynn said ISIS is its manifestation, Megan.
Catherine, thank you. Shortly before we came to air, I spoke with General Michael Hayden in an exclusive interview. He's a current principal at the Chertoff Group and a former director of the NSA and the CIA. General, great to have you here on such an important night. Not only did they reportedly kill James Foley, but they have another journalist, Stephen Joel Soltoff, who worked for Time magazine, among other publications, who they are threatening will meet the same gruesome fate if we don't change our policies in Iraq and withdraw our troops from Iraq. This man's life, they say, depends on President Obama's next decision. They need to be taken seriously given what we saw today. Put it in perspective for us, please.
Megan, it's terrorism, the literal definition, the killing of innocents for political effect. And that's exactly what this is. Now, I can imagine what's going on inside government right now. They're trying to confirm the video. Actually, more or less, they're trying to look for evidence to make it not true. And they probably won't find that. And so they'll quickly determine it is true. And now they need to figure out what to say about that. And I don't mean to say they're trying to be manipulative or evasive. It's really important what the American government says, because there are a lot of audiences for the next American statement on this. Not just ISIS, but our Iraqi and Kurdish friends as well.
How big are the stakes right now?
Well, look, the president articulated a policy which was very limited, at least in the way he described it. We're going to prevent genocide, and we're going to protect Americans inside Iraq, most recently in Erbil. But the American support for the Kurdish-Iraqi move against the Mosul Dam, that actually had American air power in close support to an offensive operation. We have already gotten beyond the president's rhetoric in terms of what it is we are doing on the ground in Iraq. And frankly, my point of view, we need to do more. Preventing genocide is a virtue. Protecting Americans is a virtue. But we have a fundamentalist, radical state now in the middle of the Middle East. We can't let that stand.
What are we going to do about this other American who is under threat right now?
Well, again, that's why we've got to be careful with our messaging, what it is we say publicly. But frankly, Megan, since I'm out of government, I'm a little more free to say we have to look to the broader interest of the United States. We have to look at all sorts of lives that are at threat.
Is that how the decisions are made? Because, you know, we're coming off of a period where we traded, you know, these top Taliban generals for the life of one American soldier. These are American journalists, but what would be doing? Obviously, there is an interest in saving the lives of Americans, even if it might be to the overall potential risk of America. It has to be a calculation. But what would the analysis be here? Well,
first of all, the analysis is there anything we can do to prevent it? And here, I just don't know what kind of intelligence we might have.
Do we have any, do you think they likely have any idea where he's being held or where they can find these?
Frankly, I doubt it. But if we did, given the current circumstances, you might be more embracing of risk for the rescue force, given the specific circumstances that we now have. All right, so that's one course of action.
Who would make that call?
Well, that had to all the way go up to the president.
It would.
Before we'd have to make that decision.
Who would be making the recommendations on that?
The chairman of the Joint Chiefs.
And do you believe that they're game planning this right now? I mean, what do you think is going on?
Well, it's got to be based on reality. You've got to have information where the journalist might be. Absent that, this is all theoretical.
How significant would this be in the government? As obviously you know, the rest of us are obviously following this very closely, but how significant an event is this, do you think?
Look, our government, despite that kind of popular thought that it's a black box and input in and output out, it's comprised of human beings. They look at this video too. They're emotionally affected by this. You and I were chatting before we went on the air that Iraqis have been beheaded, but this one seems more personal. Well, it's not that human lives have any different value, but this is one of our own. This is someone from our own village, from New Hampshire. This affects the people in the Situation Room and in the Oval Office the way it affects you and me. And so this has a high emotional impact. I remember what it was like when we saw that Daniel Pearl had been killed by Khalid Sheikh Mohammed.
And Nick Berg killed as well.
Right.
I mean, there was a time in this country where this was happening, and it changed it changed public opinion to some extent about what we were doing over there, because it was so gruesome and beyond the capability of the average person to grasp, to understand the barbarism, despite the reports that we've heard about what this group is doing. I mean, what should the mission be in the face of this kind of evil?
Well, again, as I tried to say earlier, prevent genocide, of course, try to stabilize Iraq, of course, protect the consulate in Erbil, of course. But fundamentally, what we've seen with this video is the character of the Islamic State. Now, do you want that to continue to exist and thrive and grow and be able to threaten other Americans, other Westerners? Now, do you think, does anybody who really understands the situation in Iraq thinks that this group is not coming after us, is not coming after the West?
The Pentagon has revealed that U.S. Special Operations Forces tried to rescue Americans held hostage in Syria by Sunni Muslim terrorists known as ISIS. The mission came earlier this summer, but it failed because the Americans were not being held where U.S. intelligence thought. Among the Americans abducted by ISIS was journalist James Foley. He has become now the first casualty of a new war against the United States declared by ISIS in retaliation for U.S. airstrikes against ISIS targets in Iraq. An American journalist has become the first casualty in a new war against the United States. The war was declared by the Sunni Muslim terrorist group known as ISIS in retaliation for U.S. airstrikes against ISIS targets in Iraq. Yesterday, ISIS posted online video of the cold-blooded beheading of 40-year-old James Foley, who was abducted in Syria nearly 2 years ago. Today, President Obama interrupted his Martha's Vineyard vacation to honor Foley and condemn his killers as, quote, a cancer. The president rarely shows anger in public, but he made no attempt to hide it today.
Jim was a journalist, a son, a brother, and a friend. He reported from difficult and dangerous places, bearing witness to the lives of people a world away. Now, Jim Foley's life stands in stark contrast to his killers. Let's be clear about ISIL. They have rampaged across cities and villages, killing innocent, unarmed civilians in cowardly acts of violence. No just God would stand for what they did yesterday and what they do every single day. ISIL has no ideology of any value to human beings. Their ideology is bankrupt.
Today, U.S. forces pressed those airstrikes against ISIS despite its threats to kill another kidnapped American journalist, Steven Sotloff. ISIS stands for Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. The president uses an alternative acronym, ISIL, for Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant. Levant being an old name for Syria and Lebanon. Holly Williams has more about ISIS goals and tactics.
You have been at the forefront.
In the gruesome video showing James Foley's murder, his executioner speaks with a British accent.
This is James Wright Foley, an American citizen of your country.
To recruit more young Muslims from the West, ISIS released this propaganda video in June featuring 3 British men who encouraged others to join them and sacrifice their lives for Islam.
Look around you while you sit in comfort and ask yourself, is this how you want to die?
In a violent rampage beginning 2 months ago, ISIS extended its territory from Syria into northern Iraq. It rules with brutality and fear, publicly executing those who offend its strict version of Islamic law. What makes ISIS unusual as a terror group is the ambition of its leaders. In the land they control, they've set up what they call an Islamic State, and now they're busy making the money they need to fund it. This video from Syria shows an ISIS fighter policing a local market. The group levies taxes and even sells gasoline and electricity. US officials say ISIS is now self-sustaining and is probably making tens of millions of dollars with criminal activities like extortion and smuggling. In a Turkish town just across the border from Syria, we met Dilal Omar Ali, who's fought against the Islamic militants in Syria's chaotic civil war. They have more money than we do, he told us, and they also have better guns, more tanks and more missiles. That's part of the attraction for some young Muslims, and they've found joining ISIS is simple. We watched in December as Syrian refugees crossed into Turkey by climbing through this wire border fence. Then these 3 men, who locals told us were fighters, slipped past us and into the war zone. Intelligence officials worry that young European Muslims who've been recruited by ISIS could be ticking time bombs when they return. And Scott, they could also be a threat to America because those who carry British and some other European passports can enter the US without a visa.
Holly Williams reporting on ISIS for us tonight. Thank you, Holly.
Foley was captured in November 2012 while covering the civil war in Syria. A year earlier, he appeared on CBS talking about another kidnapping when he was detained for 45 days in Libya.
Foley's mother released a statement last night saying she has never been prouder of her son. And Diane Foley called on the kidnappers to release other hostages, saying, like Jim, they are innocents. They have no control over American government policy in Iraq, Syria, or anywhere in the world. CBS News senior security contributor Mike Morrell is in Washington. He was deputy CIA director when Foley was taken. Mike, good morning.
Good morning, Nora.
How do you think the U.S. will respond?
So I think what the ISIS is trying to do here, Nora, is intimidate the United States into backing off of the attacks that we've done the last several weeks. And I think our response should be, and our response will be, to not do that. In fact, we should pick up the pace here. The definition of terrorism, Nora, is political violence, violence for political effect. So we should mark this date down because this is ISIS's first terrorist attack against the United States.
Mike, you briefed President Bush after Daniel Pearl was murdered in 2002. What was his reaction at the time, and what are you expecting to hear from President Obama when he speaks today?
His reaction was what you would expect it to be. There was empathy for the family and friends of Daniel Pearl. There was disgust at the way the execution occurred. And there was reinforcement in his belief that the people we were dealing with were evil. And I wouldn't be surprised if President Obama reacts exactly the same way.
Mm-hmm. Mike, take us behind the scenes since you've been in the national security apparatus about what's going on, the decision making. If you look at this tape, we're not going to show it. It's far too gruesome. That's why we're just showing pictures. But there is that man in black on the tape. He speaks in English. Does that suggest there might be Westerners involved? What's the thinking behind the scenes?
Nora, we know that there are a large number of foreign fighters who have gone to Syria and who have joined the fight for ISIS. They are both in Syria and they're in Iraq. A number of those are Americans. A number of those are Europeans who have passports where they do not need visas to get to the United States. So this is the main danger that ISIS now poses to the United States. ISIS could send those individuals back to the United States to conduct attacks. That is the #1 thing we need to worry about.
And ISIS, Mike, says they're holding another American hostage. How does the U.S. handle that?
We need to keep moving forward with our policy. And I would suspect that ISIS may assassinate him. But we need to keep moving forward. We cannot let something like this stop us.
All right, Mike Morell, thank you so much.